I have two stories to tell about, interestingly, the earlier, not later years at Great Plains, the first year of employment. Actually, the first story is about before I was employed, but was considering an offer from Great Plains in general, Doug Bergman specifically, to join the company and to leave and in doing so, in my mid 30s, leave a career that had been rewarding and fun, and I thought I'd be pursuing perhaps all of my life. Um, in my conversation with Doug on the telephone after receiving, actually, I hadn't received an offer yet. He was visiting with me about creating an offer and wondering, among other things, it turns out more specifically, what kind of money would I need to leave where I was to join Great Plains Software. I remember him saying, I want to figure out how to make an offer that won't insult you. But one thing led to another, and we talked about what had not occurred until then was any sort of discussion between us about what I was going to do in the company. And this became, over time, a source of some anxiety for me, since my understanding in those years and even now is when somebody's going to go take on a job somewhere else, he or she has a pretty good idea what the job is. There might even be a title with a few bullet points for responsibilities, or maybe even a mission statement for the role. So I said to Doug, if I come and join the company, what am I going to do? And he said, well, I'm not sure, but we really shouldn't need to worry about that because there are so many things you could choose to do that we haven't even invented yet, that you'll just have this wide menu to choose from, and you can decide what it is you want to do. So I had to absorb that, and my immediate response to that was, this sounds really cool. And so I followed it up with the question, well, what's my title going to be? Thinking if I'm going to leave this role and say goodbye to all these people who'd mentored me and I'd co-managed with and collaborated with in this one corporation for so many years, it would be cool to be able to say what my job title was going to be. And Doug said, his answer was, I don't know. He said, we'll call you vice president of something important. And I did have that resulted in a business card that said vice president on it. We didn't put something important, but the story about that is, or the memory I have is, this indicated to me, as the other story will, the kind of organization I was going to be going to. On the one hand, it was going to be very dissimilar to any organizational experience I'd ever had in the past, including the United States Army. But it was going to be a place of invention and discovery and creativity and lots of room to maneuver and learn and do things that really hadn't been done before. The other story I have is about a few months later when I was doing something important, which in those days was to travel around the country and explore the possibility of creating what would become our value-added reseller partner network for the company. And I ran around the country and I'd meet with people that might be interested in developing a prototype or betaing the idea, and could not. And the more work I did, the more confused I became about what sort of recommendation I could make back to Great Plains about developing its partner channel, or at least how to do its reseller strategy. So after one long trip, I remember walking into the company. I think it was late Friday evening, just arriving back from a flight from somewhere. I was going to pick up some things in my office and go home for the weekend. And I met Doug in the hallway, a dark hallway. The building lights were shutting down. There were very few people around. And he said to me, "How was your trip?" And I said, "Well, here's how it went." And I'm beginning to come together over a couple of options for us to pursue in developing the channel, recommendations that I would make. Understand, I knew so little, I didn't even know how little I knew when I was doing this work. I was just making ideas up on the fly based on my experiences, and with so little knowledge available to me about where our industry even thought it was going to be going, I was trying to add some value. And I've said to Doug, I've got two ideas for this strategy are evolving in my mind. And they're conflicting with one another. I'm having a hard time choosing one over the other or recommending one other over the other. And I began to describe these to him as we stood in the hallway. And I got a couple of sentences into describing one of these options, and he held up his hand like this, and he said, Howard, I hired you because I trust you." And he turned around and walked away. And I remember thinking in that moment, this is the worst possible answer I could get to the question that I'm trying to ask. Naturally, I was depending on him to take the burden of thinking this through off of me and relieve me of the responsibility and to solve the problem for me. Two things I took away from and have those today from that experience. Again, what kind of an organization am I going to work for here? What's it going to expect of me, and what will I be allowed to do in it? And finally, trust is a central tenet of the relationship that is expected to exist in this company as people come to work in it, which was a foundational message about how our values would work in the company. And those are my two stories.
Thanks, Howard.
You're welcome.